floating rate bonds. And they were trying to make the point is if you don't know what to make of these bonds, neither did Morningstar. And they're basically saying because we can't figure out basically what these things are, we can't categorize them as partly in bond funds, so we're not really going to call them bond funds anymore, and we can't really call him a bond fund. We can't put it in the bond fund category, so we're not going to call it a bond fund, and we're not going to.
Is this a commentary on style drift?
Well, it is, and remember, I think maybe you'll remember early in the year that a lot of bond funds were actually putting common stocks or preferred stocks to try to juice the yield in these funds, and now so it was the argument was you got to really watch out what you're getting in your investments because now the bond funds are putting in stocks into the bond funds, and you really weren't getting bonds anymore in your bond funds, and.
I think, what's his name out in California? PIMCO?
Yeah, Bill Gross?
Yeah, Bill Gross. I think he's doing some Olympic diving maneuvers to try and suddenly switch from being the world's greatest bond manager to an equity manager somehow. Well, I'm not sure how he's pulling that off.
We're now, you remember we have these credit default swaps and we have these fixed income derivatives and all these kind of other things, and you know, maybe they're okay in these funds, but remember that back in 2008 when the Schwab Yield Plus, this ultra short bond fund, lost a third of its value, and it sort of collapsed, and we had this big problem back there. So that's the reason why we all should be concerned about it.
So I guess what you're saying is that when you delegate the authority to a money manager in your portfolio to make asset allocation decisions, you might get yourself into some trouble.
That's right.
That's what I'm hearing here.
And also, if you're doing it yourself, you better read that big, thick prospectus that you should be reading.
Right. Oh, those are exciting. I read them every night. That's how I get myself to bed. Yeah, I think Scott makes a good point here, which is when you are using a mutual fund or a money manager who has the authority to invest in anything other than a very narrowly defined asset class, that you may lose control of your own asset allocation. I bring to mind the story, since I just spent the summer in Orange County, California. Do you remember when they went bankrupt?
Yes, it was 1998, was it?
Do you know that was a bond portfolio?
Oh yeah,
yeah. They didn't own anything but bonds, yet somehow they lost all the money.
Yeah, the guy convinced him that he knew what he was doing. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's well said, Morgan. We're going to move on to our guest now, who's looking at me like, hey, what did I come here?
Hey, I'm learning too. It's great.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be the owner of the Allstate, the number one, I don't know, a really good Allstate office here in Austin.
Well, you know, I always kind of joke that when I was growing up, I don't think I ever said I wanted to be an insurance agent when I grew up. But, you know, you never know.
It doesn't just roll right off the tongue. It's not exactly a rock star, is it?
But I do enjoy what I do, definitely. So I was in the banking industry beforehand.
By the way, financial planner really wasn't high on my. I had jobs like quarterback on my list.
I had police officer, but that's a whole nother discussion.
I know, you're gonna have to tell us that in a minute. All right, so go ahead.
So I was actually I got my first job as a bank teller because I graduated college, didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and it's amazing where you just look for opportunity, and moved up in the bank and quickly decided I liked it, and spent over 14 years in the banking industry, but things were always changing and wanted to be my own boss and have my own agency. So Kelly's my business partner, Kelly Conway, and we decided to leave banking world together and go into insurance. And Allstate's a great company, and we get to advise our clients, help educate them, and be there when they need us with claims. So have a lot of fun, a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, so how has business ownership been for you? Is that everything you dreamed it was?
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but it's lucrative, right?
Yeah, you know, it's something you build over time, and it is your baby, just in another form. I've had to learn that I can't control everything, and that I've just got to be able to help as I can. So when clients are calling and upset 'cause they've just been in an accident, making sure that I provide resources and calm them down and help with the situation. So I think I become more of a psychologist than anything, because we're there to help.
I know we're psychologists. In our We're going to take a break here, folks, but when we come back, Melissa's going to tell us sort of property casualty 101. You know, what does the top to bottom review of a brand new client or prospect look like? We'll see you after the break. See, we've done this before.
I'm sorry, what?
We've done this before. You can tell.
I just listen.
That's why the guests are really making, because we, you know.
You can just joke around with
We
it.
just joke around. It's just why it's a conversation, and there's no prep because you are an expert in your field.
Right.
So,
What I say goes.
You're supposed to say right, not right.
yeah,
That's the intonation.
Yeah,
was
that's
it.
what I said. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are having a great show today with Melissa Fleming, the agency principal of an all-state insurance agency here in Austin. And she's about to give us sort of property casualty insurance 101. And, you know, the reason we want to do this show is that it's one thing to become wealthy. It's one thing to save and invest smartly, but it's a whole other ballgame to stay wealthy. And that's where really what Melissa does comes into play. We include an insurance review for every single client we meet, and there's a good reason. That's we want to keep them wealthy. So we really rely on people like Melissa to help us and our clients make good decisions and purchases. So tell us, what do you know, let's just start off with what's the basic review. You know, if somebody says, I have some insurance and I bought it in 1978 and I really haven't looked at it since. What do you do?
I'm first going to ask if they'll share with me their declaration pages, because I can kind of see where they've started.
Is that like the Declaration of Independence? What is that?
It is. So on a car policy or a home policy, you're going to have declaration pages that list the types of coverage you have and the amounts. And you know, a lot of times people haven't reviewed it in years. They don't know why they have, what they have, and what do they have.
Many of our documents are as old as the Declaration. They're yellowing on the edges. Yeah.
And those declaration pages are they're really the first 2 or 3 pages of the documents, aren't they? With the
Right. They might have a policy that's 62 pages. I've seen it. I've seen 80. And there's really only about 3 pages that are the most important. That's going to give the overview. The information behind it's going to be more detailed if they want the late night reading that you were talking about.
Those are the pages you give your lawyer if you ever get into that position, right?
Right. And you know, they are important, but hopefully the agent that you're working with is also giving you examples and explaining the types of coverage. So for those people who don't want to read, have a better understanding of what coverage they have without having to read it.
Okay, so they dig up their policy and they give you the declarations pages for, and this is for home, auto, what about their business insurance? Do they give you that? If they have D&O and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. And Kelly in our office is actually a certified insurance counselor, and she handles all the commercial in our policy in our office.
Yeah, after you get done paying those premiums, you need counseling, right?
And you know, commercial's a whole other world. I was like, Kelly, you do that. It's over my head.
So she handles the commercial side?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. But if you do own a business, or what about a rental property?
All of that's going to be on there. If they have condos, we're seeing a lot of people in Austin buying condos now. So we want to get as much information about all the policies they have, because what we're really going to start with is what do they have, but more importantly, what do they need? Because the way to look at insurance is that you want to have more insurance than you do assets. So that way, if you're ever in a situation...
So that way when something bad happens, you can get even richer?
Or have it paid for so you don't lose your wealth, right? I always say, especially for when looking at liability and injury, you want to make sure the attorneys are going after the insurance company and not you. And if you don't have enough insurance, they're coming after you.
Right.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is kind of look at, we actually create a spreadsheet in our office that's going to detail the types of coverage and amounts, and then we're going to talk to the clients about what they need. And I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that I see, especially, I mean, I don't know if you want me to give you some examples. It's kind of interesting, like on the auto policies, people will call our office and they say, okay, just give me the bare minimum what I have to have that the state requires. Okay, well, let's talk about that. And we can easily do it, but for about $5 more every 6 months, you're going to double your coverage. And people don't think about it. If they've got the state minimums and they hit a car who hits a car, those 30,000 limits are going to be used up really quick. And then they're going to be looking at the insured. So we start having those kind of conversations. And then people who have started accumulating more assets, well, then they're going to need more insurance than the state minimums or more because
Do
they're a
you
bigger
find
target.
that, are people getting their other advisors involved in this? Do their CFPs or CPAs, for example, want to see the coverage, or do they loop them into the conversation, or is it usually just between you and the client?
The majority of the time it's between me, the client, sometimes the lender, because a lot of times we're getting them when they're refinancing their home. I will ask them to talk to their advisor. It just depends on how good of a relationship they have. A good advisor is going to be involved, and we actually try to partner with advisors and let them know what we're doing. But they should be talking to their advisors about it.
Absolutely, because oftentimes it's the advisor that can, because I don't want to say, you kind of have a conflict, right? The more insurance they buy, the more you get paid, essentially.
Right.
Right. So if you could bounce the ideas off of your financial advisor or your attorney or your accountant and say, hey, she's saying I actually need to get some more serious coverage than I have there. That person doesn't have any skin in the game, and we can hopefully convince them that you're right. It's just an alternative source.
Absolutely, and I think it's also important for the advisor to be involved because those policies correlate to their entire financial picture that the advisor can help them with. For example, health insurance, right? So when I'm looking at an auto policy, I'm going to talk to them about personal injury protection, which covers medical bills and then lost wages. So they need to be talking to their advisor. Do they have a disability policy? Because they don't need as much personal injury protection if they've got disability that can kick in. Or their health insurance, and so their advisors need to be looking at that for them as well. We're just one little portion of their financial picture.
And an important one at that. What about when they start asking you about other types of insurance? They must do that. What do you do then?
Well, and it depends on their situation. I think a type
Life
of
insurance, health insurance. Do they ask you? They probably do.
it is kind of funny. When I was in the banking world and working with financial advisors, if we brought up life insurance, the clients would take a step back and be like, no, because I think they were afraid of being sold a product and they didn't realize that was a part of the financial picture. But now being on the insurance side, they correlate health insurance and life insurance to it. So usually I'm going to get a financial advisor involved, especially if they have one that they're engaged with to talk about the life insurance. We offer it in our office and definitely can help clients. It just depends on their needs.
You have life and health license too?
I have those licenses. The health insurance we do refer out, and life insurance majority of the time we do as well. It depends on how complex your situation is.
I just figure, well, I imagine what happens is they start talking to you and getting comfortable with you, and then they say, hey, what about life insurance? They've got to say that.
Yeah.
Because I know how you are, and you take a lot of time to talk to people and find out what's going on and give them an individualized attention, and you're kind of a trustworthy kind of person. So I would think they would ask you that.
And life insurance is really important, and I think sometimes people just get concerned that they can't afford it, but you can't afford not to have it. I had a good friend whose brother-in-law was killed just a month ago in a motorcycle accident. He had 3 kids. One was only 6 weeks old, and they didn't have any life insurance. And so now the family's having to figure it out. And what I also see a lot of times is they're stay-at-home moms. And so or stay-at-home husbands, what have you. But the working spouse.
So sexist.
I know, hey. But the
You didn't know he was on the show, did you?
No. But the working spouse will make sure that they've got insurance for them in case that they don't have their income and they're not able to work, that they forget about that value that the spouse has. And if that spouse isn't around, then what are they going to do for daycare? And what are they going to do for cleaning service? You can't do it all. And the spouse is probably going to be grieving, and the spouse might need to take some time off too. And if they're worried about continuing to have that income in because there's not life insurance, it can put a huge strain on the family. So we really try to ask them about those questions and see what they have.
No doubt. All right, we're going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we're going to continue our discussion about insurance, and we're going to get Melissa to tell us some good stories.
Is it going okay?
Hmm?
Is it okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a conversation. But just, the more outrageous the story.
What?
The more outrageous the story, the better.
Okay. I've got some stories.
Here's some funny stories about people that don't buy it that should have, or some crazy stories about, in 4 years you must have gotten some real kooks on the phone. Welcome back, Austin. Morgan, Scott, and I are having a great conversation with Melissa Fleming, the co-owner of a local Allstate insurance agency, about primarily property and casualty coverage. Before I forget, let me remind you to please find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook by searching WorthPointe with an E. And add us, like us, comment. We'd love to have your questions. We'll be glad to read them on the air and answer them in the next week's show. You can also find us on the internet at WorthPointeRadio.com. Anyway, so Melissa.
Yes.
I want to hear some stories. I want to hear some stories that illustrate good lessons for people about insurance. I myself, really, I understand the people that don't want to buy, they want the minimum liability coverage. When I did that, I didn't have any money. So I'm like, go for it, sue me. But when you start to accumulate assets, it's a whole other ballgame.
Right.
So if you're going to be financially independent someday, you have to get into this game of getting insurance, and that is spreading the risk between you and all your neighbors that something unlikely but devastating happens to you. So tell me some stories about, tell me some horror stories. Tell me some people that you talked to that didn't quite pay that premium or didn't fill out the application and then had a disaster.
Well, I'll actually tell you a crazier story that involves me.
Ooh, a personal story.
Yes, and it was before I was an insurance agent, so let me give that disclaimer. But I will tell you, I was properly protected and I was given bad advice. So I'll tell you, it's important to have a relationship with your agent and make sure that they know what they're talking about. But I actually got sued by my neighbor because apparently I was causing my dog to bark and wake them up during the day because they wanted to sleep all day. And I had an umbrella because a great policy that I love is an umbrella policy. It covers your bodily injury, so if somebody gets hurt at your house, but it also covers if you are sued for something verbal. It's called personal injury, so slander, defamation, wrongful eviction. Did
they have damages against you for your dog barking during the day?
Well, the craziest thing is this went on for 2 years. I had an umbrella. I should have had representation from my other insurance company and was told I wasn't. And I spent $18,000 over 2 years trying to say that we weren't doing anything. It was dismissed, but it just proves you don't have to do anything wrong to get sued.
So your policy didn't have the...
It did. I was told it didn't.
Oh, were you able to go back and get reimbursed?
In different ways, yes. But it was so crazy that my neighbors actually videotaped me in my house in my pajamas while I was pregnant. So I actually countersued for invasion of privacy.
Weren't you
doing
it?
Yeah, but I was awarded some money that way.
Let me ask you, do you still live there?
I do, but they don't, thank goodness.
Oh, they left?
Yes.
They probably ran out of money.
Each their own. But it was crazy. And so I tell people all the time, you're looking at this $200 a year policy for an umbrella. And it's not about, are you going to use it? Or are you going to do something to need it? I didn't do anything. And that cost me $18,000. So use me as a reason to talk to your agent and say, is there a reason I should have it? I always say if you've got dogs, haha. If you've got rental property, if you have young kids who are driving.
If you have neighbors.
If you have neighbors that are a little off.
If you have a pool.
If you've got a pool, trampoline, any of those.
Is there an upcharge if you have a pool on your policy?
Nope, not at all. People
No?
think there is. Mm-hmm.
I would think so.
Yeah, there's not.
What
there
about
also
a
is
Rottweiler
So,
upcharge?
It gets a little hairier. You're allowed
Hairier?
one. No pun intended.
Really? That was pretty good if you didn't intend a pun.
Certain dogs, you can have one, but you can't have more than one, or it's excluded. They're not going to be covered for liability if they bite somebody.
So upcharge unless you want, if you want to exclude the
You
dog
exclude
bites,
them, right.
then you can keep your same premium.
Right. With the Allstate, it doesn't matter what kind of dog as long as there's not a bite history. So if they bite, then we'll not
That's
renew
generous. You know what adverse selection is?
you. Yes.
I'll put all the people with Rottweilers that are Allstate
They
customers.
can call me. That's okay. Call me.
Okay, folks, all of you with pit bulls and Rottweilers, call Melissa. Well, speaking of that, how do they find you? Do you have a website or a phone number?
Absolutely. They can go to Allstate or they can Google my name. I think we pop up pretty easily because we get a lot of people who find us just by
Yeah, there's
Googling
not very
our
many
name.
Melissa Flemings. That's a very
Yeah.
rare name. And what is your web address?
It's allstate.com/Fleming Conway. So it's my last name and then my business partner's last
Okay.
name. So it's probably easier
But
to
if they do
Google
Fleming,
Melissa Fleming.
yeah,
Allstate.
Melissa Fleming, yeah. Allstate.
Yeah.
Or world's best insurance agent.
Exactly.
Or most beautiful. Do you want to tell us about that wedding thing you got coming up?
Oh goodness, yeah, I was telling Chris it must be my day in the spotlight because on Sunday I'll be modeling wedding gowns
Oh,
in Round Rock.
wow. From radio to modeling. You are having a banner week.
What can't she do?
Yeah, that's really the question.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have you, I can tell. I think this radio show is going to get better ratings than it ever has.
That's right.
Simply because we have the beautiful and talented Melissa Fleming. That's true. I'm never going to forget that. You think we could play that back on a loop or something? That'll be the title of today's show.
Sure.
Fire away.
Yes. It's very relevant, and there's been a lot of changes that are happening with flood policies. And I'll tell you, I had a client that bought a house October 29th. And how, if you're in a flood zone, you have coverage for dwelling, and then you've got separate coverage for contents, and you choose separate deductibles. And they can be anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000. And she wanted $5,000 deductibles for each because she couldn't afford higher premiums. I practically begged her to go for lower deductibles because it was only like $300 more a year. And 2 days later, here came the flood. So it's really, really relevant. I will tell you what's been happening is that the federal government was subsidizing the rates, and they're not anymore. So if you're in a flood zone, it's going to be increasing 20% every year until it gets to the actual rates. Depending on your flood zone, you could be looking at anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 a year in flood insurance. Now, if you're not in a flood zone, doesn't mean that you don't need the insurance. It's just much cheaper. It's only $400 a year. So I kind of tell people, if you're near a creek, still look at it. They have. Well, the thing that's the most important that a lot of people aren't aware of is that if you're buying a house in a flood zone, you need to get assigned the seller's policy. If you don't get assigned their policy, you're at the maximum rate starting day one.
I don't know what that means, but we're going to save that for next week's show.
Okay.
So remember that. We're going to pick up right there. Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate you tuning in with us today. And we're going to have Melissa back next week for part 2 for our property and casualty insurance boot camp here at WorthPointe Radio. See you next week. Do talk about that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's crazy. It is crazy. I did all this research because I went out to a realtor place, because realtors now, if there's like a flood, if they're in a flood zone, I mean, people
Sell this
pull
on
them out of it.
Don't tell us.
Yeah, but I don't want to like
This
hurt
is like
realtors
the
and
Tonight
scare
Show.
them.
This is like the Tonight Show. Save it for the camera.
Well, I like to hear myself talk, so I can say it over and over.
You're in the right room if you like to hear yourself talk.